Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the History Hotline podcast. It is a complete honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to have a very special guest on the podcast this week. Someone who I am it's a guarantee that you're going to learn so much from, and this is going to be a fantastic episode. So do tune in and listen in and get yourself a cup of tea or whatever you like to do when you're listening. I wanted to welcome Mr. Donald Campbell to the podcast today. Hi, Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, good morning, Diana. It's an absolute privilege to be here, and thank you so much for extending an invitation to me to this wonderful podcast of yours. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. And I don't mean to interrupt the program, but I have to remind you of the History Hotline's first ever live podcast episode coming to you, well, to London on the 15th of September 2024 at 2 p.m. at King's Place in King's Cross. The episode will be filled of gems, historical moments, stories, and lots of information, as any podcast episode would give you. I really hope to see as many as of you as possible there, to meet some of you, and to just share in the kind of historical knowledge, to bask in all the historical education and information as we have a live episode all together. It will make a change from me recording in my bedroom and editing through the early hours of the morning as I typically do. It will be nice to be, in the light of day, surrounded by people talking about history. So please do join me on the 15th of September. Tickets are in the show notes or on social media, or you can follow the London Podcast Festival for more information. And now back to the interview with the one and only Mr. Donald Campbell. Before I formally introduce you and tell the listeners a little bit about you, I just wanted to kind of talk about how we met. Even though we actually haven't met in person, everything we've done has been virtual. But Mr. Campbell, thankfully, was one of the people that I was able to interview for my PhD research, and that was months ago in January.
Indeed.
And then through the Forgotten Generations, which is a platform that Mr. Campbell is founder and he runs, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. He then interviewed me on YouTube, and I've shared that video, so you can watch that as well if you'd like to know more about either of us and the conversations we've been having. And so now we're kind of back again to me interviewing you. So this is our third chat in theory, and
Indeed.
here we are. Now, Mr. Campbell served 36 years in the Royal Air Force and retired as a warrant officer in 2006. His years of service as an engineer extended all over the world, including places like Northern Ireland, Madagascar, Germany, Holland, Denmark, Norway, Sardinia, Saudi Arabia, the Falkland Islands, Belize, and the USA. And I'm sure that's probably only naming a few. He served most of his years on large operational units, such as a survival equipment technician, working on fast jet aircraft such as Jaguars, Harriers, Tornado, Hawks, and a variety of other helicopters. And his final 7 years were in charge of his trade training school as a training manager at RAF Cosford, Defence College of Aeronautical Engineering. And he has had two commendations for meritorious service, one of which was in conjunction with the Queen's Birthday Honours List in 2002, and a Good Show Award for outstanding personal contribution to the work of the Careers Information Service in 2004. Mr. Campbell is a very proud veteran, and he consistently gives his time to the community as an ambassador, as a role model for the younger generations, whether they're in the armed forces or outside of it, presenting his work in schools, organizations, young police forces, and he is the founder and director of the Forgotten Generations, which I'll ask you, Mr. Campbell, to explain further what that is, but all I can say is it is a wealth, a breadth, a fantastic service of archival information, of oral history interviews, of pictures, of videos, of stories, of this forgotten generations that we're gonna speak a little bit about in a second. And that's all collated online, completely accessible to the public. There's no reason why any of us can't use that and utilize that and find out more about the histories that we'll speak more about today. So welcome, Mr. Campbell.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, my goodness. That was a fantastic summary, and I really, really, really appreciate that because we need to get the word out there. Just touching on why this was created, I think the main ethos, is to create uh, educational knowledge and the contribution that we as a people have done so that they will change the narrative in the national curriculum on a permanent
Absolutely.
basis of
Yeah,
Black history, not just 1 month of the year. It's on a permanent basis. So that's the overall ethos of the Forgotten Generations.
brilliant. And just for those that don't know anything, what is the Forgotten Generations? What do you do with the Forgotten Generations, and why did you start it?
Okay, so the Forgotten Generations was started after I wrote my book called My Path of Life, which is one of three books, a trilogy I'll be writing. And it's the first book, as I say, My Path of Life started with me as a young boy being born in the Caribbean and left behind by my parents. My father left me when I was 4, and the rest of us, and then my mother did the same thing when I was 7. So I didn't see them again until I was 13, which is quite a few years. So I absolutely loved my mother. Not that the others didn't, but me personally, I really pined for her. So all those years, I missed her dearly. So until I was 13 again, when we met up again, it was very, very tough for me. And I'm sure it was the same for the rest of the siblings. So having done that, I sort of put a big question mark in between what happened to me and other youngsters, and also the parents who traveled. So what happened to us who were left behind, and what happened to the parents and whoever came and decided to set up the Forgotten Generations to interview people about their life stories. And it's been amazing ever since. And then, of course, because I've been in the armed forces, as you mentioned, I decided to look at people who served before me because I served all those years and I didn't know anything about my foreparents having served in World War One and World War Two.
Mm,
When I joined in the 70s, I thought I was one of the first black young men joining the armed forces. That's how little knowledge I had of our foreparents who've contributed so much. So I hope that answered that particular question.
absolutely. How long have the Forgotten Generations been going for? When did you start it?
Actually, it's just turned 3 years on the 21st of May.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's 21st, first, yeah, I think it's about 19th or the 21st of May, 2021. It was set up. Round about.
Brilliant. And in the 3 years, you have been able to collate so many stories. How do you kind of, I guess, go about? Where did you start with it? Who did you interview first, or where did the kind of journey take you as you've been going and creating this archive?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. The first interview was a young lady who is currently in the Royal Navy. And
Brilliant.
I set it up. And when I first started, actually, it wasn't called the Forgotten Generation, it's called Talked On, because I just wanted to talk to people about their life stories and record it. So, but
Nice.
later on, Forgotten Generations, the actual name, actually came about. So I interviewed this lady. And she told me about her life story, being, she was a Jamaican. She is a Jamaican, and what happened to her life and how she came from Jamaica to here to join in the Navy. So that was my first interview, and then also thought about doing a podcast, which I've also set up on, and I don't do as much that I'd like to do with the podcast because
Yeah.
there's so many people out there to do similar to what you're doing with, and then I thought about those who don't want to be seen or
Yeah.
be verbal. So I write articles as well. And one of the
Brilliant.
articles I've written was a lady who I visited yesterday. She's 101,
Wow.
and her story is just marvelous. And we spent a whole afternoon with her yesterday, and it's just fantastic. So I write articles as well. So it's all those things put together that
Yeah.
makes up the Forgotten Generations.
Absolutely. And the website itself, I think, goes beyond just sharing the stories of the people. that you've interviewed and spoken with, it also highlights different kind of organizations, community groups that are doing this work, and kind of signposts people, I think, to the kind of various things that they might be interested in, having arrived at the Forgotten Generations and kind of wanted to go on that journey of better understanding, I think, the the lives of Caribbean people and African people in Britain.
Absolutely, and the reason behind that is the fact that we must show ourselves as people within the community, and within the community, you've got the people in the organization, an organization in the environment, all of those things, all those we are a part of. We're
Mm,
intertwined. So we're talking about businesses, we're talking about being poets, we talk about music, we talk about being politician, everything. So the Forgotten Generation is all about that, and that's why we try to highlight wherever we are, whatever we do, under those categories and those headings.
brilliant. Have you always been interested in history? I know you obviously were in the RAF, and your work has been quite engineering heavy career wise. Have you had an interest in history from school, or is it something more recent? When did it all start?
I would say it's more recent in the sense that when I left school, I had no intention of looking into history at all. I wanted to just go forward. I just wanted to be in the military. And don't ask me
Mm.
why, because there was no actual link to a family member or a friend. I think I was influenced by the media. That's
Yeah.
all I can say. But I wanted to be, and I was. Now, one of my first experience with history was when I went to Northern Ireland as an 18-year-old, and I'm there as a black young man, and I realized that the Irish people were looking at us differently and saying that we have the same history, and I'm saying we can't have the same history because I'm black and you're white, and that's how little I knew. And then
Yeah.
speaking to people, I learned that they too were enslaved as
Mm.
indentured slaves and etc. and sent all over the world. I could understand that, but was that's much later on after I left the Air Force and started to look into it.
Yeah.
So and then I then after 36 years service, I started finding out that once I started looking into it, that the contributions that were made have been made by the Caribbean people
Mm.
and African people is immense.
Yeah.
And some of it involved myself in terms of the units I served on, you know, actually buying aircraft for some of these squadrons that were obliterated, for instance. And I served on these units and I didn't know that kind of information. That would have made me immensely proud to know that my foreparents contributed to that degree.
Mm.
And also, when I look at the history of the some of the veterans, like the most decorated World War II veteran was a Trinidadian.
Mm.
Normally in World War II, you fly 30 missions.
Yeah.
He went up to 50 and then up to 80 missions.
Wow. What
Yes,
was his name?
is Ulrich Cross.
Brilliant.
So, I mean, serving all those years in the Royal Air Force, and I knew nothing of that. And I
Mm.
actually served on two of the bases that he served.
Oh wow.
So, there was so much that I didn't know. So once I started to learn about the history of our contributions, and I wanted to know more, and the more I know, and I sort of pass on to the community, the public, the more I realize that the public want to know.
Yeah.
So that combination of me wanting to know and learning more and passing it on really makes up what the Forgotten Generation is all about. And then, of course, recording live uh, recordings of people, especially the World War II veterans, which I've done quite a few, which can be
Yeah.
seen on the website, and passing that on to people. People are amazed on a wide basis,
Mm.
not just black people, but people on a whole are using this now. You know,
Yeah.
as a for instance, the Royal Air Force, the Airtime magazine transcribed completely the story of a World War II veteran who's now 100. He was
Wow.
100 in February. And last weekend, I think it was, I went to his launch of his memoir, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So all these combination of things is what makes up the Forgotten Generations going forward.
Brilliant. And this episode is coming out around the day that's marked Windrush Day, where we typically think about the kind of arrival of people from the Caribbean post 1948 and post war, and the kind of acts that allowed that, and the lives that they led. And I know that you traveled here as a younger child, and I find sometimes that the Windrush narrative is very much about people contributing and working and serving, and that's all very important. But then, if you arrive as a child, you're not within that frame right away, and also the work you do looking at people that have served and served in World War II and even World War I, that's pre Windrush, you know? So I wondered how you kind of think about a day like Windrush Day, and how that your work fits into it, or your life, or, if you have any thoughts around that.
Yes, I do, and I think it's a good question in the sense that it's Windrush itself is quite limiting,
Mm,
um, because we, as you just said, came here many years before Windrush. Not
of
even
course.
just talking about World War One.
Right.
There's a book that I'm a part of called Black Country Roots,
Yes.
and the first page in there says 350 years ago is when people came to the Black Country,
Mm,
right? So, way outside of the enclave of Windrush of 1948 to 1971.
yeah.
So I think although it's a good thing to celebrate any such thing, I
Yeah.
think we should emphasize the fact that it's a limited time span, and that people should definitely try and look beyond those years before and after. And people talk about the Windrush ship. There were several ships that
Yeah.
carried people to and from the Caribbean, that haven't been mentioned. So it is little bit limiting. However, it's there, and it highlights a passage of time for us that we can talk about, but we should increase on that.
Absolutely. Do you think that the way that we are currently within the public celebrating that day, and I'm thinking about things like, statues going up in train stations, and I think the way that we're thinking about it now, do you think it's an appropriate way to honor that contribution, and those people, or the kind of wider history of migration of Caribbean people?
Well, I think any way of honoring our people and getting it out there in the public eye is as long as it is a positive, in the
Yeah.
sense that that it's too long that we've not put ourselves out in the public eye, so people tend to forget of us, and hence the
Mm,
forgotten generations. And I find that when I go and do talks to people, especially out in the country area where people are not used to black people, so to speak, they are educated by the media,
yeah.
and the media tend to be they sell negativity because that's what a lot of people want to hear,
Mm,
if you know what I mean. So they're not fed the fact that you are achieving your grades, and plus, and your honors list and all that sort of thing. They tend to talk about the guns and the knives,
yeah.
the mental institution. So when I go and talk about our achievements in World War One and World War Two and now,
Yeah.
and beyond all of that, they're amazed.
Yeah.
Some of them are even amazed in today's society that we served as black people in World War Two. You know, and then looking at that, some of them are even more amazed. Even though black people are amazed of black women serving
Mm,
in the armed forces as well. So we are educating everybody.
yeah. Absolutely. I think it's very important. And as you said, so many people even today are unaware the education system hasn't really done so much on a kind of top government level of kind of bringing in policies that would update the curriculum in any way. And I know there are teachers out there that do their bit to make sure these stories are included. They're inviting you into the schools, they're doing that work themselves. Many of them listen here. But there are still so many young people, and people that have already passed through the education system that won't be beneficiaries of this knowledge or this education. And it is, as you said, so important to kind of counter the stereotypes that we see in the media
Absolutely.
about black people, young black people.
Yeah,
whoever.
yeah, absolutely. And what I find disturbing is that the fact that in the 70s when I joined the forces,
Mm,
I'm still seeing youngsters who are still devoid of information that I was devoid of in the 70s. That shouldn't
yeah,
happen. We should make sure that that gap or those gaps are filled with information because history should be taught, but history of everyone, not just some people. Yeah, very, very important because it
yeah,
empowers young people.
absolutely,
Yeah.
definitely, and it widens their
Mm.
kind of understanding of the world.
Yeah,
Whether it be Black history or the
yeah.
histories of other people that aren't solely focused on British history, it really does, I'd say, lead to a better, more tolerant and understanding society because you have a
Absolutely,
better grasp of the world.
absolutely. And what it does also is give some youngsters a sense of purpose and focus
Right, yeah.
to say that their foreparents have actually fought and some have died for them to be here,
Mm.
so they belong.
Yeah.
Because some people don't feel belong.
No.
If you know that your foreparents have given their all for this, for you to be free, and also for this land to be free as we are, then you will feel different. I'm pretty sure. So they
Yeah,
must be educated.
absolutely. Outside of, I think, the kind of Windrush Day and commemorating that. What other ways would you like to see these histories thought of and celebrated? I don't know if you had £1 million money tree and you had an endless budget. how would you how would you commemorate these histories and share them with people?
Well, for instance, the forgotten generations, we have a few ambitious plans. We are in the process of engaging the Heritage Lottery Funds for an exhibition here in the
Brilliant.
West Midlands, which initially I wanted to do the armed forces per se, but
Yes.
I've been advised by them to start as, a little bit smaller
Mm,
and make a template of it. So I was starting with the Royal Air Force and looking at Royal Air Force West Midlands as a template,
yeah.
and that is very much on the way with supporting letters from museums and universities and educational establishments,
Brilliant.
and so that's just one effort, and a part of that, to keep the public in tune with what we're doing, we're having a virtual museum attached to that. So whatever we do within that particular exhibition, we'll archive it in the virtual museum so it can be accessed by anyone.
Yeah.
So that will be a very, very much a very telling and long-lasting sort of addition to what we're doing now, because we will
Absolutely.
we will be interviewing, an approximate amount of we're doing about 7 different decades from World War One
Wow.
to now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and then archiving that.
Brilliant. I think it's important that it's happening in the Midlands as well. I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
having now fled the Midlands to the big city,
Yes.
I'm always a bit sad. I think how little is done for the Caribbean community, or maybe we do ourselves or we don't do
Mm,
in terms of showcasing our histories, whether it is in museums, gallery spaces,
mm,
in the Midlands. Maybe I'm not in tuned to it in the way that I am in London, but sometimes
mm.
I feel like there could be a lot more because there's such a presence in Birmingham and the surrounding Midlands area.
And I do agree with you. There needs to be a lot more because
Yeah.
everybody thinks about the capital city,
Mm,
number one city, as virtually the only place to go to, and this is the second city, Birmingham. And I think we need to step it up a bit in terms of, you know, catching up, so to speak, and do as much as we can
yeah,
to bring a presence, that sort of presence, to the second city.
absolutely. I would agree. Gotta get moving with it. Most definitely.
Absolutely.
Um, Growing up, and I'm pulling on a story you told me in the interview that we first did for my PhD, and I don't know if you'll remember. I might have to jog your memory. But how did you understand um, about the armed forces? And I think basically the story I want you to tell is about a teacher of yours. that was
Yes.
in the armed forces,
Oh, yes.
and then how that kind of came back to you when you know, how many years later found yourself in the armed forces and remembered that teacher.
All right. Okay. The story. I'm sure I can recall that story because it's sort of it's sort of indelibly in my memory.
Yeah.
You know, a young lad and seeing two teachers um, fighting, so to speak. You know, you
My
know, from
favorite story I've
yeah,
heard so far, I think, in my interviews, definitely.
yeah, from in the classroom out into the playground. And of course, as a youngster watching that sort of thing, it was just amazing because when it spilled out the playground, it was just like an open air movie, only it was real. And for the teacher to go and get a gun, a revolver from his cottage. I mean, that was the first time I think I've ever seen a gun anyway live.
Yeah.
And fortunately, he didn't actually shoot the person because another teacher sort of grabbed his arm. But the whole thing happened, and then much later on in life, I learned that this head teacher who walked with a limp, and I
Yeah.
was querying why he walked with a limp, and they said, well, he was injured in the campaign because he was a World War II veteran.
Wow.
Now, years later, now when I look back at that, I'm thinking, wow, there's and I think it was Royal Air Force as well. There's a veteran that was head teacher of my school all those years back and meant nothing to me because nobody explained any of that to me, you know. And although I knew something of the Caribbean, most of my knowledge was about Britain, England, you know. Nobody actually tells you what our foreparents had done, and the thousands of Jamaicans say there's lots of Caribbeans, but thousands of Jamaican who came across and for I think some of those stories should have been told to us as to who these people were and what they've done.
Absolutely. And even I think growing up in Jamaica, you weren't told of or were you told of the contribution or and the contribution to the war effort wasn't just the people that were going. The Caribbean sent disproportionate amounts of funding to Britain to support the war effort, and that growing up in the aftermath of 10, 20 years later
Mm,
after
mm.
World War Two, none of that was conversation, public knowledge, thought of, explained.
Absolutely. And speaking personally, of course,
Yeah,
because again, Jamaica is nearly 3 million people, so some people may have heard of all of this, but I
of
personally
course.
didn't because I left Jamaica, as I said, I was 13. And up until the point when I left school and joined the Royal Air Force, which was 18, no one had told me that any of my foreparents had fought in any of the wars. I never
Yeah.
heard of it, you know. And some people still today, I think, probably still don't know that.
Mhm.
So it's something that we need to get out there, and that's very much a part of what the Forgotten Generation is all about: educating our people.
Absolutely. And the Forgotten Generations, it serves as an archive, as I've mentioned, for these histories of the armed forces and wider histories. And I just wanted to talk more to you about kind of who you decide to interview and how you find people, because I think for our generation, as a younger generation, we do everything online. And it's like, if you don't find them online, they don't exist. So, how do you kind of, find people? Are they people within your community, like locally to you, or do you get recommendations, or did people come and find you to be interviewed? And how does it all work?
Um, I guess it's all the above, but it's mainly me and others within the organization seeking people to be interviewed, and it's not exactly an easy thing in terms of there's a lot of people who don't want to be visual.
Right.
And I see that as a unique selling point about the Forgotten Generations. That visual recording of an individual, you can't change that.
Yeah.
It's okay writing a book or whatever, that's fine. But words can be changed. But when you interview somebody, that is really very very powerful. So
Mm.
that's the number one thing. And then of course the podcast. I like to do that, and the articles. So I actually, as I go out to various organizations, and whether it's a church, whether it's community center or anybody, we talk about forgotten generation, and I extend the invitation to say, you've got elderly, you've got people below them, and you've got the younger generation. We would like to interview
Yeah.
anyone that's willing to tell their story. And I've got to keep on emphasizing to people that everybody's got a story to tell. Everybody. I call it the path of life. And if you join the dots in the path of life, it's amazing what your story is like,
Mm,
right?
absolutely.
So I actually, that's the main way of getting interviews. And then, of course, I ask people to be members. So I say to the members, we've got over 100 members now. Can you extend to your, personal siblings and families and anybody that would like to be interviewed and tell their stories? So it's
Absolutely.
a lot of different ways, really, in terms
Yeah. It's brilliant, and I think you made a point there that it's you're not just interviewing people that are veterans or of that kind of earlier generation. I was interviewed, and I did definitely haven't served, and was not alive during World War II. But the project does encompass those following generations and looking at the work that different people within the communities are doing in different professions. You've got teachers on there, ministers, students like me,
of.
across the board, a whole wide range of people that have been interviewed. And this is creating, I think, such a wonderful archive because we don't often think that we're making history whilst we're living,
Mm,
but we are. And we have a long standing presence here in this country now. As the generations go on, it's nice that there is a kind of record, a visual, an audio record, a written record with the articles as well
mhm.
of these stories that are continuing and shaping society in Britain.
Yes, and I think we must carry on. And if I could tell you that a bigger picture in my head is that I always think of having a Caribbean stroke African Wikipedia, if you like,
Yeah,
where we know as a people where we can go and get some
find.
information.
Yeah,
That's a bigger picture in my head. Where can I access some information about this, directly about this,
yeah,
as a set of people? And that's the bigger picture. So
brilliant.
how that is achieved in the future, that's another story. But step by step. So
Step by step,
we'll see how that
indeed.
goes.
Absolutely, and nothing is impossible, that's for sure.
Absolutely,
We
absolutely.
can get there. Um, Thinking then about the forgotten generations, do you have a favorite interview that you've done, or one that really stands out in your mind that you'd like to share a little bit more about?
Yes, several. Yours, of course, because when
Oh,
we when I interview young people like yourself, it's such a delight,
oh,
and to
thank
see
you.
that the work that you're doing is fantastic in terms of, um, a university level taking this forward. That can only be good. And the fact that we've interviewed each other, and you're such a really good interviewer, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So are you.
It makes quite a difference because it's so relaxing. But a massive one that stands out is he's 100 now, and I think I spoke about him earlier on. His name is Ralph Otti, World War II veteran. He's also Jamaican,
Yeah,
and he stands out above everyone else because he actually went out to the Caribbean on the Windrush ship, which a lot of people don't know about. We only talk about the Windrush ship coming from the Caribbean.
yeah.
So sitting down with him and talking to him about his life journey after serving in the Royal Air Force on the
Mm,
617 Dambuster Squadron, which we talk about all the time, he's immensely proud about doing that. Then he went back to Jamaica on the Windrush ship, telling about
wow.
the journey on the way there, and that can
Yeah,
be seen, and that's been transcribed as well by the Royal Air Force in their magazine.
brilliant.
And then later on, he came back and lived in Boston ever since, where
Mm,
he actually achieved so much as an individual, from
yeah,
going into a company as just their bookkeeper to become a part of their management and going around and representing this massive company with all the other big companies. So he's achieved a great deal, and to still be associating with him is immense because when I went to his launch the other day, I was given the privilege of introducing him as his book launch because they asked me to write the foreword for his book as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. So he is the one that stands above everybody else.
Yeah,
But there have been some very, very good ones.
brilliant.
And I'd like to do some even more ones going forward.
Yeah, of course. I wondered as well, and this just came to me when you were speaking about that um, journey back to Jamaica on the Windrush, and thinking what that might have been like for people to go back. Um, this wasn't on the script, sorry to say. So I'm off track.
Not a problem.
But I just wondered, in terms of you arriving, you didn't choose to migrate here. You were sent for by your parents. And I often think that choice that so many people made to come to Britain from the Caribbean has meant there is now this Black British population and, you know, British born Jamaican people here and all that stuff. Do you, not are you happy because you didn't necessarily make the choice, but yeah, are you happy that you came to England? Like now you've seen kind of how life has shaped out for you here and family and you know following generations. How do you feel about that migration that so many people made?
That is really a good question. Um, when I first came here, I just couldn't believe. I mean, I was very happy
Yeah,
to meet my parents
of course.
because I pined off to my mother really, really in a big way.
Yeah.
Father was like, probably because he left me when I was very young, but mother, big, big. So it was great to meet up again. And then the family coming together. I'm saying a lot here because when some family meet up, it doesn't always work,
Mm,
right? So that,
yeah.
but that's another story again. But leaving Jamaica in the warmth, where I used to go, and I used to pick a fruit off the tree, and I said, "Oh, I don't like that one," and I throw it away, and then I pick another one, and and I came here, and my mother was going to the market and buying these fruits that I used to pick, and I'm thinking, "Why are you buying it?" Things like that. I'm just giving you an idea of the
Of course.
change that I
Yeah.
encountered, you know, and get up in the morning and knowing that the sun will shine and blue skies and most of the year round, apart from some rainy season. It was just fantastic. And then the transition to snow and ice and the minus temperatures and all that sort of thing. But, you put them in perspective and you learn to live within those sort of environments and climate changes and whatever, and you get on with life. So I dearly miss the Caribbean,
Yeah.
but I sort of encompassed what there is here
Mm,
for me to live and learn with. There's this wider perspective, wider life choices that I have that gave me a chance to see the world.
yeah, absolutely.
So there are two sides to it, and in life you've got to look at the positive and the negative. And I say to people that the positive should definitely outweigh the negative. So as long as it's about 75% positive,
Mm,
in
yeah,
from me, from my perspective, then that's the way to look at life, is how I see it. So they're definitely positive and negatives on both
of
sides.
course. Definitely. And I think the life that you have led in your career allowing you to essentially see the world. I didn't even list all the countries that you've been to, but I can imagine having that opportunity and doing that work all around the world, meeting all kinds of people and places and eating all kinds of foods has been quite a beautiful experience that you've been able to go
Absolutely.
through.
Absolutely. I say to people that I've been to the University of Life.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Because when I was only in the Air Force about a year, I think, and still 19, and I went to Madagascar for 2 months. That's
Wow.
amazing. And I'm writing in my second book, just describing my 2 months in Madagascar, which is very much like the Caribbean.
Yeah.
I thought it was back in Jamaica, so to speak, because everything was like, all the warmth and the fruits and
Mm,
all of these different things. Very tropical. And I absolutely loved it, and I couldn't believe it. But I was miles away from home, and I was there over Christmas.
mm,
You know, so and then I traveled to other parts of the world where it was actually minus temperatures and always. You go to Norway, and I also traveled to Norway, which is quite a unique experience. I went. I've been to Norway four different times.
Yeah.
One of the times I went to Norway, I went up to the north, into the Arctic Circle. I
Wow.
was there for 12 days, no night,
Yeah.
no night at all in 12 days. That just kind of blow your mind. You know, you have to draw the curtains to get some darkness. You
Mm.
know, so experience those things. You know, is just quite an education, and it's invaluable because what it teaches you is to you can do things differently and achieve the same result. And it also teaches you about people, you know, their culture, languages, and all these sort of things. So it makes you more acceptable to the world,
Yeah.
people.
Definitely. And understanding and being shaped by
Yes,
all these experiences.
yes, yes.
Do you have a favorite place that you went to in your many travels?
I'm going to say yes. There are several places that I've been. I did like very much the some of these sort of European countries, Scandinavia and all that, you know,
Yeah.
Denmark and Norway, because they give you different things. But it's probably because I went to Las Vegas after the Falklands, and I lived in a hotel off the strip for 7 weeks, and
Wow.
you know, just walking distance from Caesar's Palace and all this sort of thing. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, and getting paid to be there by Her Majesty. I mean, that was just absolutely fantastic, you know. And we lived in a hotel, of course, being Royal Air Force, and
Yeah.
it was just magical. But I also went to places like Sardinia, where we used to go every week, every year for 3 weeks, and it was like
Mm.
first to the 21st of June, that sort of time.
Yeah.
So it was summertime, you know, and it was just working like probably half a day and then going to the beach for the rest of the day because you know that's sort of so you get different places that give you different sort of experiences and you know I like to delve into the local culture and cuisine and so you know you get a lot of different experiences and of course I've got a mention Germany where I spent 5 years in Germany
Yeah.
where I also learned to speak the language to a fairly good level, where I was interpreting for my friends, you know, so they could get on.
Yeah.
That was quite a culture shock for me going to Germany, knowing about the war, and
Mm.
they were the enemy and all that sort of
Right.
thing. So going there and exploring and living with the people and speaking with them and learning from them was quite an education as well.
Brilliant. I can imagine. That sounds like oh crazy amount of
Yeah,
places
yeah,
in just that answer, let alone
yeah.
all the rest of it. Um, I've got a few final closing questions that I just wanted us as listeners to further support the work of the Forgotten Generations. And I just want you to tell us how we could go about doing that. If anybody's listening that is interested in what you've had to say today and the work that you've been doing and probably will continue to do, no doubt, how can we support?
Well, first and foremost, I like to keep the listeners updated. So, for you to be updated, it'd be great to become a member of the Forgotten Generations, which is accessible on each website. At the top, it says membership. Click on it and fill your name and your email addresses and tick the box where it says you're not a robot, that sort of thing. And so I then keep at least on a monthly basis I keep the members updated, but more regular if I can. And I have a YouTube channel which you can watch and they can subscribe to. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Um, and then of course you can. We have flyers that I can send to you that you can probably send out to some of your contact. Um, and of course donations always good because to keep all of this going,
Yeah.
you know, it's very much a cost
Of
cost
course.
to develop the website, it costs to the flyers, the cost to everything. Life is like that.
Yeah.
So if anybody would like to donate, there is a page on there where it says donation. A matter of fact, next door to the actual membership link, it says donation. So however small
Mm.
contribution would be very much accepted. So those are the things that I would say that I would like people to think about in trying to keep us buoyant and
Yeah,
afloat and going
absolutely.
forward. Yeah.
Definitely. And I will put in the show notes for this episode, wherever you're listening. The links for the website will be here and the YouTube. And from there, you can navigate, as Mr. Campbell said, and find the donation links and the membership. And obviously, if there are any issues with that, reach out to me via social media and I can send you any links or anything that you need. Also, I think just generally watching, if you're in the Midlands, watching Midlands ITV News, you probably see Mr. Campbell there. I feel like I've seen you pop up there, and a lot of the interviews on the YouTube channel have shown you talking about a variety of historical people and moments for the news and sharing those stories to the wider audience.
Yes, indeed. We've been on BBC, and like you said, ITV,
Yeah,
and the Telegraph, the various newspapers, local newspapers such as the Phoenix, which I contribute to because I have a monthly column.
yes,
So every month I put an article in the column, and then I share that with all the members as well. You know, so yes, as far as the media concerned, I don't think you can get too much of the media because it really does help to reach the wider public and to advertise what we do. So
absolutely.
yes, I love that.
Brilliant. And a kind of final question that I have, as a young person, what advice do you have for young people going forwards that are interested or wanting to engage with the histories of people from the Caribbean or other diverse histories, but people from the Caribbean as that's what we're talking about today.
Yes, and that's again is one of the reasons I started the Forgotten Generations because I realized that there's a lot of limitation in that question that you just asked. Where do people go and find this kind of information? And I wanted to to create a educational platform, which is the Forgotten Generation, and that's why I would like it to develop to a level where it's like our own Wikipedia, if you like, so that people can confidently say, "Oh, I want to know something about a artist, as in musician, if you like, or I want to learn something about, um, a politician and who was the first female politician, for instance, black
Yeah,
female, Diane Abbott, and how did she get on? Because I
yeah,
want to be a that's on the website and other things like that. So, I would like to create that educational tool and platform to give the younger generation and everybody else
yeah.
that confidence that they can find under whatever heading
Mm,
um, on that and our site as the forgotten generations.
absolutely. Brilliant. And that would be so wonderful of a thing for us to have, and I think enable another generation of young people that are keen and want to know and have a more rounded education than their parents and the generations before them that were afforded.
Yeah, yeah. And can I say that, of course, with the younger minds like yourself, if there are areas that you think that we could improve on and also increase, and if it's not there at all,
Yeah,
just please say so. They actually can drop a line to yourself or back to ourselves to say, comments, how can we do better?
brilliant. That sounds wonderful. And yeah, you can reach Mr. Campbell through the Forgotten Generations website, or through our social media. I will tag the page in everything that goes up, so you'll be able to kind of find your way there, if you so wish. Thank you so much, Mr. Campbell. I wondered, do you have any other closing words or anything you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up this episode? And I say my final thanks.
Well, as always, I would like to say thank you so much.
Oh,
And it
thank you.
really gives me great pleasure to link with the younger generations like yourself. You did a marvelous job. And I'd hope that do you continue that, of course. And I hope that to see more people like yourself doing something like this because I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. It's definitely my pleasure. I love history and love the history of Caribbean people, even more than that. So it's never a chore for me. It's always a joy, and it's a real pleasure to have you here, and sharing the work you are doing. Thank you so much for doing that work. It can be a thankless task, I think, at times, when you aren't necessarily, you're not necessarily seeing all the feedback that people are probably watching these videos and feeling so warmed and encouraged, but you don't always get that back when you do things on the other side of social media or online platforms. So thank you so much for doing that
And I'd just like to add a little bit more to that that you just reminded me.
work.
And basically is yeah, it's you do this not necessarily for the fan, but it really makes a difference when people give you feedback.
Yeah.
And I had a feedback this morning from, and this takes me into another category where, because of what we're doing with the Forgotten Generations, we got an award from the Prime Minister called Points of Light Award.
Yeah.
From that, there's another gentleman who received the same thing. He's of Caribbean heritage as well. So we've sort of formulated a group called Battlefield of Our Mind.
Mm.
And from an interview that I did with him, which is looking at why we joined the armed forces. In other words, what happened when you leave become you're a civilian to start off with,
Yeah.
when you join the armed force, what happened? And once you become a civilian again, what happens after that? So we had a chat about that and my experience of, you know, the different things that can happen. It does happen to
Mm.
you, the good, bad,
Yeah.
and the indifference. And when I sent it out to the members, one of the members came back and he was like, he said, you almost brought tears to my eyes because I had to read it twice because it resonated so much with him,
Yeah.
you know. So those are very, very good feedback, and we love that because it helps us and gives us that sort of impetus to carry on doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. It is brilliant. It's lovely to hear when people are touched by these histories and by these stories. Thank you so much, Mr. Campbell. Thank you for being on this episode. And all of you listening, thank you for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed this week's episode, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you.